The coffee maker gurgled its familiar morning symphony as I stood in our kitchen, the ceramic tiles cold beneath my bare feet. Steam rose from my mug, carrying that rich aroma that had become as essential to my mornings as breathing. Outside, October rain drummed against the windows with the persistence of tiny fingers tapping for attention. I had no idea this Tuesday would shatter everything I thought I knew about my life. Sarah hummed softly as she moved around our bedroom upstairs, and the sound drifted down through the old farmhouse like music. We had lived in this house for 12 years, since shortly after our wedding. Every creaking floorboard, every whistle of wind through the slightly warped kitchen door, every morning ritual had become part of the fabric of what I believed was our shared existence. My name is David Patterson, and until that morning, I would have sworn on my grandmother's grave that I knew my wife better than anyone else in the world. Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell Patterson, 38 years old, worked as a pediatric nurse at County General, loved Victorian novels, made the world's best blueberry pancakes, and had a laugh that could light up the darkest room. She wore her auburn hair in a practical bun during the week and let it fall in waves over her shoulders on weekends. She had a tiny scar on her left hand from when she cut herself opening a can of tomatoes during our second year of marriage, and she always put extra honey in her tea when it rained. These were the details of a life I thought I understood completely. The morning routine unfolded as it had thousands of times before. Sarah descended the stairs at exactly 7:15, her nursing shoes making soft squeaking sounds on the hardwood. She wore her hair up already, a few rebellious strands framing her face, and her scrubs were the pale blue ones that made her eyes look like summer sky. "Morning, honey," she said, her voice carrying that slightly husky quality it always had before her first cup of coffee. She kissed my cheek, and I caught the familiar scent of her lavender shampoo mixed with the faintest hint of the vanilla lotion she used before bed. "Morning, beautiful. Coffee's fresh." I handed her the mug I had prepared exactly as she liked it, 2 sugars, splash of cream, stirred counterclockwise because she insisted it made a difference, though I had never been able to taste one. She wrapped her fingers around the warm ceramic and took that first grateful sip, closing her eyes in appreciation. This moment, this exact sequence of movements and words and shared comfort, had played out so many times that it felt like choreography we had perfected through years of practice. "Mrs. Henderson is bringing her twins in for their checkups today," Sarah said, settling into the chair across from me at our small kitchen table. "Those boys are going to be handful. Last time they were in, little Tommy somehow managed to get his head stuck in the waiting room chair." I chuckled, picturing the scene. Sarah had a gift for painting pictures with her stories, making me feel like I was right there in the pediatric ward with her. "How do you even get a kid's head unstuck from a chair?" Very carefully, with lots of soap and even more patience, she laughed. Dr. Morrison said it was the first time in 20 years of pediatric medicine that he had to call maintenance to disassemble furniture to free a patient. The sound of her laughter filled the kitchen, bouncing off the yellow walls we had painted together 3 springs ago. She had gotten more paint on herself than on the walls, I remembered, and we had ended up having a paint fight that left us both covered in sunshine-colored streaks. These memories, these thousands of small moments that made up the architecture of our marriage, felt solid and real and permanent. How could I have known that some of them were built on foundations that did not exist? Sarah finished her coffee and rinsed her mug in the sink, another piece of our morning ballet. She checked her watch, a simple silver piece I had given her for her birthday 2 years prior, and made a small sound of concern. "I need to leave in 10 minutes. The Henderson appointment got moved up, and if I'm late, those twins will tear the waiting room apart." She paused at the kitchen doorway, one hand on the frame, and looked back at me with an expression I had seen thousands of times but would now, looking back, interpret entirely differently. There was something in her eyes that morning, a flicker of what I might have called nervousness if I had been paying closer attention. But I was comfortable in our routine, lulled by the familiar rhythm of our shared life, and I missed the signs that everything was about to change. "Have a good day, honey," I called after her as she headed upstairs to collect her purse and keys. "You too, David. I love you." "Love you too." The words floated down the stairway like they always did, casual and automatic and expected. In just a few hours, I would be replaying this conversation in my mind, searching for hidden meanings in every syllable, wondering how many times she had said those words while harboring a secret that would redefine everything I thought I knew about love and truth and the woman I had shared a bed with for 13 years. After Sarah left, the house settled into its daytime quiet. I worked from home as a freelance graphic designer, so my office was the converted den just off the living room. The walls were covered with project samples, color swatches, and a few framed pieces I was particularly proud of. My desk sat positioned so I could look out through the large window that faced our side yard, where Sarah's vegetable garden lay dormant under the October sky. The morning passed in the familiar rhythm of client calls and design revisions. Around 10:30, I was deep in conversation with Mrs. Chen about her bakery's logo redesign when I heard a car pull into our driveway. The engine sounded different from Sarah's Honda, deeper and more powerful, and I glanced out the window to see a black sedan I did not recognize. A man emerged from the driver's seat, tall and lean with graying hair and a face that carried the weathered look of someone who had spent years squinting into sun and wind. He wore dark jeans and a leather jacket that looked expensive, and he moved with the confident stride of someone comfortable with taking charge of situations. I excused myself from the call with Mrs. Chen and walked to the front door. The stranger was already standing on our porch, his finger poised over the doorbell. When he saw me through the glass panel, he stepped back slightly and waited. I opened the door, feeling the cool October air rush past me into the warm house. "Can I help you?" The man studied my face for a moment, and I saw something shift in his expression, as if he were confirming something he had suspected but hoped was not true. "Are you David Patterson?" His voice carried a slight accent I could not immediately place, something that suggested he had grown up far from here but had spent years smoothing the edges of his original speech patterns. "I am." "And you are?" He extended his hand, and his grip was firm and calloused in a way that suggested he worked with his hands. "My name is Marcus Webb. I think we need to talk about Sarah." The use of my wife's first name, spoken with a familiarity that made my stomach tighten, sent the first real warning signal through my system. This was not someone asking for directions or selling insurance or delivering a package. This was someone who knew my wife, and the way he said her name carried implications I was not yet ready to consider. "What about Sarah?" I kept my voice level, but I could feel my pulse quickening. Marcus looked past me into the house, then back to my face. "Is she here?" "She's at work. At the hospital." I did not step back from the doorway or invite him in. Something in his manner, in the way he carried himself like a man accustomed to difficult conversations, made me want to keep the barrier of the threshold between us. "Good," he said, though his tone suggested this was anything but good news. "That will make this easier. Mr. Patterson, I need to tell you something about your wife, and you are not going to want to hear it." The words hung in the air between us like a challenge. Part of me wanted to close the door, to send this stranger away and pretend this moment had never happened. But a larger part, the part that had noticed the small changes in Sarah over the past few months, the part that had registered the new nervous energy in her movements and the way she had started checking her phone more frequently, needed to know what he was talking about. "You better come in," I said, stepping back. Marcus followed me into the living room, his eyes taking in the details of the space Sarah and I had created together. The couch we had picked out after 3 months of shopping and debating, the coffee table she had refinished herself, the bookshelves filled with her Victorian novels and my art books, the framed wedding photo that sat on the mantel above our fireplace. He settled into the armchair across from the couch, and I took my usual spot where I sat every evening to watch television with Sarah. The familiar comfort of the cushions now felt strange, as if the room itself had shifted in response to this intruder's presence. "Mr. Patterson," Marcus began, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, "how long have you been married to Sarah?" 13 years this December. The answer came automatically, but even as I said it, I wondered why he was asking questions he could easily have researched if he had wanted to know. "And in those 13 years, has she ever mentioned being married before?" The question hit me like cold water. "No, of course not. Sarah wasn't married before. I was her first husband." Marcus reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. The sound it made as he unfolded it seemed unnaturally loud in the suddenly quiet room. "This is a marriage certificate from Clark County, Nevada. It shows that Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell married Marcus James Webb on June 15, 2008. He held the document out to me, but I did not immediately take it. "That's me, Mr. Patterson. I'm Marcus Webb. And according to the state of Nevada, Sarah is still my wife." The words reached my ears but seemed to bounce off my brain without penetrating. I stared at the paper in his hand, seeing the official seals and signatures but not quite processing what they meant. "That's impossible," I said. "Sarah and I were married in December of 2011. She couldn't have been married to you in 2008. She would have told me." "Would she?" Marcus asked gently. "Take the certificate, Mr. Patterson. Look at it." With hands that felt disconnected from my body, I reached for the paper. The official document felt real enough under my fingers, substantial and authentic. Sarah's signature was there in her distinctive handwriting, the same signature I had seen on birthday cards and grocery lists and the mortgage papers for this house. "This has to be fake," I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I knew they were not. The certificate had the weight and feel of authenticity, and more damning than that, Marcus Webb had known exactly where to find me, had known my full name, had spoken about Sarah with the familiarity of intimate knowledge. "I wish it were," Marcus replied. "I wish I could have stayed in California and never learned that Sarah had started a new life here. But I needed to find her, Mr. Patterson, because we never got divorced. Not officially. Not legally." The room seemed to tilt slightly, as if the foundation of the house had shifted. I set the marriage certificate down on the coffee table between us, but I could not stop looking at it. The date jumped out at me, June 15, 2008. Sarah would have been 25 years old, 3 years before she met me. "How is that possible?" I asked. "People don't just forget they're married. You don't accidentally stay married to someone for 17 years. Marcus ran his hand through his graying hair, and for the first time since he had arrived, he looked uncomfortable. "It's complicated, Mr. Patterson. Sarah and I, we were young when we got married. Very young and very stupid. We had been together since high school, and we thought getting married in Vegas would be romantic and spontaneous." He paused, staring out the window toward Sarah's dormant garden. "We separated about 6 months later. Not because we did not love each other, but because we were kids playing at being adults, and we had no idea how to actually be married. She moved back to Illinois to live with her parents. I stayed in California to finish school. We talked about divorce, but there never seemed to be any rush. We were not planning to marry other people. There were no assets to divide. It seemed like a piece of paper we could deal with later." "But you never did," I said. "No, we never did. Years went by. I finished school, started my business, moved around the country for work. Sarah and I lost touch completely. I assumed she would file the papers when she was ready. I thought if she ever wanted to remarry, she would handle the legal side of ending our marriage. The coffee maker in the kitchen chose that moment to complete its automatic shut-off cycle, and the small click it made sounded enormous in the quiet room." "Then what changed?" I asked. "Why are you here now?" Marcus reached into his jacket again and pulled out another document. This one looked more recent, with crisp edges and the kind of official formatting that suggested government involvement. "I'm getting married, Mr. Patterson. Next month. To a woman I've been with for 5 years. When we went to apply for our marriage license, the clerk ran a background check and discovered that I was already legally married. To Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell in Nevada." He handed me the second document, which appeared to be some kind of official inquiry from the state of California regarding his marital status. I hired a private investigator to find Sarah so we could file for divorce and clear this up quietly. Imagine my surprise when he told me she was already married. To you. The implications were beginning to penetrate the fog of disbelief that had settled over my thinking. If Sarah was still legally married to Marcus, then our wedding ceremony 13 years ago had been meaningless. Our marriage license, our shared assets, our entire legal relationship as husband and wife, none of it was valid. "Are you telling me," I said slowly, working through the logic, "that Sarah and I are not actually married?" "That's exactly what I'm telling you," Marcus confirmed. "In the eyes of the law, Sarah has been committing bigamy for 13 years. Your marriage to her is not legal because she never divorced her first husband." Me. The walls of the living room seemed to pulse with each beat of my heart, which had taken on a rhythm like a drum being struck by increasingly frantic hands. I stood up abruptly, needing to move, needing to do something with the energy that was building inside me like steam in a pressure cooker. "This is insane," I said, pacing to the window and back. "Sarah wouldn't do this. She couldn't have lived with me for 13 years knowing we weren't really married. She couldn't have looked me in the eye every morning, shared a bed with me every night, celebrated our wedding anniversary every December, knowing it was all a lie." Marcus watched my agitation with what looked like sympathy. "Mr. Patterson, I know this is devastating. When I found out Sarah was married to someone else, I went through the same stages you're going through right now. Disbelief, anger, the desperate need to find some explanation that would make it all make sense." "How long have you known?" I asked, stopping my pacing to face him directly. "About 3 weeks. It took my investigator 2 months to track her down. Sarah has been very careful about maintaining her privacy. She uses her married name, Patterson, for everything now. The only reason we found her is because she still has her nursing license under Mitchell, her maiden name. 3 weeks. This stranger had known my life was built on a lie for 3 weeks, while I had been living in blissful ignorance, making plans for our upcoming anniversary, thinking about maybe finally taking that trip to Ireland Sarah had always wanted. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now I need to talk to Sarah. I need her to sign divorce papers so I can legally marry my fiancée. And you need to decide what you want to do with this information." The sound of gravel crunching in the driveway made both of us freeze. A car door slammed, and through the window I could see Sarah's Honda parked next to Marcus's sedan. She was home early, 3 hours before her shift was supposed to end. "That's her," I said unnecessarily. Marcus nodded grimly. "I figured she would come home when she saw my car in the driveway." "You think she knows who you are? Even after 17 years? Mr. Patterson, you don't forget your first husband, even if you try very hard to pretend he never existed." Sarah's key turned in the front door lock, and I heard her footsteps in the entryway. She was moving slowly, hesitantly, not with her usual confident stride. When she appeared in the living room doorway, her face was pale and her eyes were wide with what looked like barely controlled panic. "Hello, Sarah," Marcus said quietly. She stood frozen for a long moment, her purse clutched in both hands like a shield. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Marcus." "Oh God, Marcus, what are you doing here?" "I think you know why I'm here," he replied. Sarah's gaze moved from Marcus to me, and I saw something break behind her eyes. The careful composure she had maintained for 13 years crumbled, and suddenly she looked like a woman who had been running from something for a very long time and had finally been caught. "David," she said, and my name came out like a prayer or a plea. "David, I can explain." "Can you?" I asked. The words came out harsher than I had intended, but I was beyond caring about tone or diplomacy. "Can you explain how you've been married to 2 people for 13 years? Can you explain how you stood in that church and promised to be my wife when you were already somebody else's wife?" She flinched as if I had struck her, but she did not try to deny it. Instead, she walked slowly to the couch and sank down into the cushions like a woman who had been carrying an enormous weight and had finally set it down. "I wanted to tell you," she said. "God, David, you have no idea how many times I almost told you. Especially in the beginning, when we were engaged and planning the wedding. I would lie awake at night trying to figure out how to explain it." "But you never did," I said. "No, I never did." She looked down at her hands, twisted together in her lap. "At first, it was because I thought it didn't matter. Marcus and I had been separated for 3 years when I met you. We hadn't spoken, hadn't seen each other, hadn't even exchanged Christmas cards. In every way that mattered, that marriage was over. The legal paperwork seemed like just that, paperwork. A formality that could wait." Marcus leaned forward in his chair. "Sarah, you knew it mattered. You knew you couldn't marry someone else while you were still married to me." "I know that now," she said, finally looking up to meet his eyes. "But I was 28 years old and I had convinced myself that our marriage was just a mistake we made as kids. I told myself that the real marriage, the marriage that mattered, was the one I was planning with David.
So you just decided to ignore the law?
I asked. Sarah turned to face me fully, and I saw tears beginning to form in her eyes. David, by the time I realized how serious this was, we were already engaged. You had bought a ring, we had booked the church, we had sent out invitations. Your parents were flying in from Oregon, my parents had bought new outfits, your sister was planning the rehearsal dinner. I couldn't call it all off and tell everyone that I was still technically married to someone else. So instead you committed bigamy. The word hung in the air like an accusation, harsh and legal and unforgiving. I thought I could fix it, Sarah continued, her voice growing smaller. I thought after we got married, I could quietly file for divorce from Marcus and make everything legal retroactively. I researched it, David. I found lawyers who said it was possible to resolve these kinds of situations.
But you never did it, Marcus said.
No, I never did it. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, leaving a streak of mascara across her cheek. At first, I couldn't find you. You had moved, changed addresses, and I didn't know how to serve you with papers. Then when David and I started talking about buying this house, about having children, about building a real life together, I got scared.
Scared of what?
I asked. Scared that if I contacted Marcus, if I dragged all of this out into the open, it would ruin everything. I was terrified that you would leave me if you found out I had lied about something so fundamental. So I told myself I would handle it later, when things were more settled, when we had been married longer and it would be easier to weather the storm. She looked around the living room, at all the evidence of the life we had built together. But later never came, she whispered. Years passed, and it became harder and harder to bring it up. How do you tell your husband of 5 years that you're still married to someone else? How do you tell your husband of 10 years? How do you look someone in the eye after 13 years of marriage and tell them that none of it has been legal? The rain had intensified while we talked, and now it was beating against the windows with a force that made the glass rattle in their frames. The sound filled the silences between Sarah's words, adding a soundtrack of chaos to match the destruction happening inside our living room.
Sarah, I said, struggling to keep my voice level, do you understand what you've done? Do you understand that our entire marriage, everything we've built together, is based on a lie?
It's not based on a lie, she said quickly.
David, everything else has been real.
My love for you, our life together, the promises I made when we got married, all of that has been completely genuine.
The only lie was about Marcus. The only lie?
I felt anger building in my chest like a fire that had found fresh fuel.
Sarah, that's not a small lie. That's not forgetting to mention an old boyfriend or downplaying a college relationship.
You were married to another man when you married me. You've been married to another man every single day of our relationship. Marcus cleared his throat, reminding us both that he was still in the room.
Sarah, I need you to understand something. I'm not here to cause problems in your life.
I'm here because I need to get married, and I can't do that while I'm still legally married to you.
I need you to sign divorce papers. Sarah looked at him with an expression that was hard to read.
There was recognition there, and what might have been fondness or regret, but also something that looked like relief.
Of course, she said. Yes, absolutely. I'll sign whatever you need me to sign.
I should have done this years ago.
Will you?
I asked.
Just like that? After 17 years, you'll just sign papers and make it all go away?
David, what choice do I have?
I've hurt everyone by putting this off for so long. The least I can do now is handle it quickly and cleanly.
But I was not ready for quick and clean. I was just beginning to process the magnitude of what I had learned, and every new realization felt like another blow.
What about us?
I asked.
What about our marriage? If you sign divorce papers with Marcus, that doesn't automatically make our wedding valid.
We'll need to get married again, legally this time.
Sarah looked at me with an expression of desperate hope. Would you want to do that? After everything I've put you through, would you still want to be married to me?
The question caught me off guard. In the chaos of discovery and revelation, I had not yet considered what came next.
I had been so focused on understanding what had happened that I had not thought about what I wanted to happen. I don't know, I admitted. Sarah, an hour ago I thought I was married to the most honest woman in the world. Now I find out I've been living in sin for 13 years because my wife forgot to mention she already had a husband. I didn't forget, Sarah said quietly. I remembered every single day. Every morning when I woke up next to you, every night when we said our prayers together, every time we signed joint tax returns or made decisions about the house or talked about growing old together, I remembered. It was like carrying around a time bomb, knowing that someday it would explode and destroy everything we had built. The confession hung in the air like smoke from an extinguished candle, acrid and impossible to ignore. I stared at this woman who had shared my bed for 13 years, who had made coffee with me 10,000 mornings, who had held my hand through my father's funeral and celebrated with me when I landed my first major client, and I realized I did not know her at all. Every day, I repeated. You thought about this every single day, and you never once considered telling me the truth? Sarah's face crumpled, and she buried it in her hands. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside her chest. When she finally looked up, her eyes were red and swollen, and her voice was hoarse with emotion. You want to know the worst part, David? The worst part is that I convinced myself I was protecting you. I told myself that as long as you never found out, it couldn't hurt you. I thought if I could just keep the secret until I died, then you would never have to go through what you're going through right now. You thought you could take this to your grave? I asked incredulously. Yes, I did. I thought if I never contacted Marcus, if I never filed for divorce, if I just let sleeping dogs lie, then eventually we would both die and it wouldn't matter anymore. Our children would inherit the house, they would remember us as a happily married couple, and no one would ever need to know that technically, legally, we were never really married. The mention of children hit me like a physical blow. Sarah and I had tried for years to have children, had gone through fertility treatments and specialists and the heartbreak of miscarriages. We had finally accepted that we were not going to be parents, and had found peace in being aunt and uncle to our siblings' children instead. Children, I said. My God, Sarah, what if we had had children? What would their legal status be? Would they be legitimate? Would they have inheritance rights? Would they even be able to use my name legally? Sarah's face went white. I don't know, she whispered. I never researched that part. You never researched whether our hypothetical children would be considered bastards under the law? David, please don't use that word. What word would you prefer? Illegitimate? Born out of wedlock? Children whose parents were never actually married because their mother was too cowardly to tell the truth? Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Maybe I should go, he said. You two obviously have a lot to work through, and I don't need to be here for this part. No, I said firmly. You stay. You're part of this mess, and I want you to see what your missing divorce has done to my life. That's not fair, Sarah said. This isn't Marcus's fault. He didn't know I had remarried. This is my fault, David. Only mine. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Oh, I know it's your fault, Sarah. I'm very clear on that. But he's here now, and he's asking you to sign papers that will officially end the legal relationship that should have been terminated 17 years ago, and I want him to understand the full scope of what that means. I started pacing again, my mind racing through all the implications I had not yet considered. Do you realize what this means for our finances? I asked. All of our joint assets, the house, the bank accounts, the retirement savings, none of it is legally shared property. As far as the law is concerned, you've been my live-in girlfriend for 13 years, not my wife. If something happened to me tomorrow, if I had a heart attack or got hit by a car, you wouldn't automatically inherit anything. You wouldn't have the right to make medical decisions for me. You wouldn't even have the legal standing to plan my funeral. Sarah's sobs intensified. I know, she choked out. I've thought about all of this. Do you think I haven't laid awake at night terrifying myself with these scenarios? Do you think I haven't imagined what would happen if you got sick or hurt and I couldn't be there for you the way a real wife should be able to? But you still didn't tell me. I was a coward, she admitted. I was selfish and scared and stupid, and I kept thinking that if I could just figure out a way to fix it without you ever knowing, then no one would get hurt. Well, congratulations, I said bitterly. You've managed to hurt everyone involved. Me, Marcus, his fiancée who's waiting to get married, probably half a dozen clerks and lawyers who are going to have to sort through this legal nightmare. Marcus stood up slowly, reaching into his jacket for what I assumed were the divorce papers Sarah would need to sign. Mr. Patterson, he said, I understand you're angry, and you have every right to be. But Sarah and I can resolve our legal situation fairly quickly. It's a straightforward no-contest divorce, no property to divide, no custody issues, no alimony. We can file the papers tomorrow and have it finalized within 60 days. And then what? I asked. Then Sarah and I pretend the last 13 years never happened? We start over from scratch? We have a new wedding ceremony and invite everyone back to celebrate our second attempt at getting married legally? David, Sarah said, standing up from the couch and reaching toward me, we don't have to tell anyone. We can get married quietly, at the courthouse, just the two of us. We can backdate it if we need to for legal purposes. Most people never need to know any of this happened. I stepped away from her reaching hand. The thought of her touching me right now, with all of this lying between us, made my skin crawl. More secrets, I said. More lies. More pretending. That's your solution to a problem caused by 13 years of secrets and lies and pretending? I don't know what else to do, she cried. David, I love you. I have loved you every single day since the moment we met. That hasn't been a lie. That has never been a lie. I made one terrible mistake when I was young and scared, and then I made it worse by being too afraid to fix it. But my love for you, our life together, the marriage we've had in every way except the legal paperwork, all of that has been real. Has it, though? I asked. Because I thought I married an honest woman. I thought I married someone who trusted me enough to share the difficult parts of her past with me. I thought I married someone who valued our relationship enough to make sure it was built on a solid foundation. You did marry that person, Sarah insisted. I am that person, David. I made one mistake. One mistake that you compounded every single day for 13 years. One mistake that you chose to keep compounding every time you signed our joint tax returns knowing they were fraudulent. Every time you listed me as your emergency contact knowing you weren't legally entitled to do so. Every time you introduced me as your husband knowing it wasn't true. The rain outside had reached biblical proportions, and thunder rumbled overhead like the sound of cosmic furniture being moved around. The storm seemed to be echoing the chaos that had taken over our living room, our marriage, our life. Marcus cleared his throat again. I'm going to leave these papers with you, he said, setting a manila envelope on the coffee table next to his marriage certificate to Sarah. Sarah, when you're ready to sign them, there's a notary public listed on the cover letter who can witness your signature. Once they're filed, we'll both be free to move on with our lives. Where are you staying? Sarah asked. Are you still in town? I'm at the Holiday Inn off the interstate. I was planning to drive back to California tomorrow, but I can stay another day if you need more time to process this. No, Sarah said quickly. I'll sign them tonight. There's no point in dragging this out any longer than it already has been. Marcus nodded and headed toward the front door. Sarah and I followed him, though we maintained a careful distance from each other. At the threshold, he turned back to us. For what it's worth, he said, I hope you two can work this out. I can see that you love each other, even in the middle of all this mess. Sarah, you and I were kids when we got married. We didn't know what we were doing or what we wanted. But you and David, you've built something real here. Don't throw it away because of a mistake we made when we were 22 years old. After he left, Sarah and I stood in the entryway listening to his car pull out of our driveway. The silence between us felt enormous, filled with everything we had said and everything we had not said and everything we still needed to figure out. What happens now? Sarah asked. Now you sign those papers, I said. And then we figure out if there's anything left of this marriage worth saving. The hours that followed Marcus's departure felt like moving through thick fog.
Sarah retreated to the kitchen and sat at our small table with the divorce papers spread in front of her like evidence from a crime scene. I could hear her occasional sniffles and the scratch of pen on paper, but I could not bring myself to watch her sign away her first marriage while our second marriage hung in the balance. Instead, I found myself in my office, staring at the computer screen without seeing it, trying to process the complete reconfiguration of my understanding of my own life. The graphic design project I had been working on that morning, Mrs. Chen's bakery logo, seemed to belong to a different universe, a place where marriages meant what they were supposed to mean and wives told their husbands the truth about their pasts. Around 6 o'clock, Sarah appeared in the doorway of my office. She had washed her face and reapplied her makeup, but her eyes were still red and swollen, and she moved with the careful precision of someone who was holding herself together through sheer force of will. "I signed them," she said quietly. "All of them." "Marcus left his phone number, so I called him at the hotel. He's going to pick them up tonight and file them first thing tomorrow morning." I nodded but did not turn away from my computer screen. I was not ready to look at her yet, not ready to see the face I had kissed goodbye that morning before learning that she had been living a lie for 13 years. "David, we need to talk about what comes next." "Do we?" I asked. "I'm not sure there is a next, Sarah. I'm not sure there's anything left to talk about." "Please don't say that." Her voice broke on the words. "Please don't give up on us without at least trying to work through this." I finally turned around to face her. She was wearing the same pale blue scrubs she had put on that morning, but they were wrinkled now and stained with tears and mascara. Her hair had come loose from its professional bun and was falling in uneven strands around her face. She looked like a woman who had been through a war. "How do we work through this, Sarah? How do we come back from 13 years of fundamental dishonesty? How do I ever trust you again?" "I don't know," she admitted. "But I know I want to try." "David, I know I've made a terrible mistake, but I can't bear the thought of losing you over something that happened before we even met." "It didn't happen before we met," I corrected. "It happened every day we were together. Every morning you woke up and decided not to tell me. Every night you went to sleep knowing you were lying to me. Every anniversary we celebrated, you knew it was fake." Sarah sank into the chair across from my desk, the chair she sometimes sat in when she wanted to chat while I worked. How many times had she sat in that exact spot, telling me about her day at the hospital, sharing stories about difficult patients or amusing interactions with co-workers, all the while hiding the biggest secret of her life? "You want to know the worst part," she said. "The worst part is that I became such a good liar that I almost started believing the lie myself. There were whole months where I would forget about Marcus, where I would feel completely, genuinely married to you. And then something would remind me, some legal document we had to sign or some conversation about marriage in general, and the guilt would come crashing back." "What kinds of things reminded you?" I found myself morbidly curious about the mechanics of her deception. "Stupid things. When we refinanced the house, I panicked for days because I was afraid the title search would somehow reveal that I wasn't legally entitled to be on the mortgage. When your father died and we were dealing with his estate, I kept worrying that someone would check our marriage certificate and realize it wasn't valid. Last year when we updated our wills, I spent the entire meeting with the lawyer convinced he was going to ask questions I couldn't answer." She rubbed her temples as if trying to massage away years of accumulated stress. "And every single time we made love," she continued, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper, "there was a part of me that felt like I was cheating on you. Not with Marcus, but on you, with myself. Like I was letting you think you were making love to your wife when you were really making love to someone else's wife who was pretending to be yours." The intimacy of this confession made me deeply uncomfortable. The thought that our most private moments had been tainted by her secret, that she had been thinking about her legal status while I was thinking about how much I loved her, made me feel nauseated. "Stop," I said. "I don't want to hear any more. You need to hear this, David. You need to understand what this has cost me too. I haven't had 13 years of blissful marriage while carelessly deceiving you. I've had 13 years of loving you desperately while hating myself for not being brave enough to tell you the truth." "Poor you," I said sarcastically. "It must have been so difficult to maintain your web of lies while enjoying all the benefits of being married to me." Sarah flinched.
That's not what I meant. Isn't it? You got to have your cake and eat it too, Sarah.
You got to be married to me in every practical sense while keeping your options open legally.
If things went bad between us, you could have just walked away without needing a divorce. If something better came along, you could have left me and gone back to your real husband. That's not true, and you know it. David, I never wanted anyone but you. From the moment we met, you were the only man I wanted to be married to. That's why I couldn't bear to tell you about Marcus.
I was terrified you would think I didn't take our relationship seriously.
But you didn't take it seriously, I pointed out. People who take marriage seriously make sure they're legally free to get married before they do it.
People who take marriage seriously don't commit bigamy and then cover it up for 13 years. The sound of thunder punctuated my words, and lightning illuminated the window behind Sarah's head like a spotlight highlighting her guilt.
You're right, she said finally. You're absolutely right about everything, David. I was selfish and cowardly and dishonest, and there's no excuse for what I did. But that doesn't change the fact that I love you more than I've ever loved anyone or anything in my life. Love isn't enough, Sarah. Love without trust is just obsession. Love without honesty is just manipulation. Then what do you want me to do? She asked desperately. How do I earn back your trust? How do I prove to you that everything else about our marriage has been real? I don't know if you can, I admitted. I don't know if I even want you to try. Sarah, when I woke up this morning, I thought I knew who I was married to. I thought I knew the woman I had shared a bed with for 13 years. Now I find out she's a complete stranger.
I'm not a stranger, Sarah protested. I'm the same woman who cries at sad movies and burns dinner when she's distracted and sings off-key in the shower. I'm the same woman who held your hand during your father's funeral and celebrated with you when you got your first big client. I'm the same woman who loves you so much it physically hurts sometimes. But you're also a woman who can look me in the eye every morning for 13 years while hiding a secret that invalidates our entire relationship. And I don't know how to reconcile those two versions of you. Sarah stood up abruptly and began pacing around my small office, her nervous energy filling the room like electricity before a storm. David, I understand that you're angry. I understand that you feel betrayed and lied to, because you were betrayed and lied to. But we can fix this. Marcus is filing for divorce tomorrow, and as soon as it's finalized, we can get married again. Legally this time. We can start fresh with a clean slate and put all of this behind us. Can we, though? Can you really put 13 years of lying behind you? Can I really put 13 years of being lied to behind me? Every time you're late coming home from work, I'll wonder if you're seeing Marcus. Every time you get a phone call and step into another room to answer it, I'll wonder what other secrets you're keeping. Every time you tell me you love me, I'll remember that love and honesty don't mean the same thing to you that they mean to me. That's not fair. Fair? I laughed bitterly. You want to talk about fair? Is it fair that I spent 13 years thinking I was building a life with my wife when I was actually just living with my girlfriend? Is it fair that our anniversary is meaningless because our wedding was a sham? Is it fair that if I had died in a car accident last year, you wouldn't have been legally entitled to inherit any of our shared assets? Sarah stopped pacing and stared at me as if I had slapped her. The color drained from her face, and she gripped the back of the chair to steady herself. Is that what this is about? She asked in a voice so quiet I almost could not hear her. The legal implications? The financial aspects? David, are you more upset about the paperwork than you are about us? No, I said, though even as the word left my mouth, I wondered if it was completely true. I'm upset about everything, Sarah. I'm upset about the lies, the deception, the complete disregard for my right to know the truth about my own marriage. But yes, I'm also upset about the practical implications. I'm upset that for 13 years, we've been living under a false assumption about our legal relationship. We can fix the legal part, Sarah said urgently. As soon as the divorce is final, we can go to the courthouse and get married properly. We can make it all legal and official and binding. And what about the emotional part? What about the trust that's been shattered?
What about the fact that I now have to question everything I thought I knew about you?
Sarah moved closer to my desk, her eyes desperate and pleading.
David, please. I know I've broken your trust, but people rebuild trust all the time. Couples get past infidelity, they get past financial dishonesty, they get past all kinds of betrayals. This can be one of those stories, one of those marriages that comes out stronger on the other side. This isn't just any betrayal, Sarah. This isn't cheating or lying about money or hiding some embarrassing secret from your past. This is fundamental fraud. This is building our entire relationship on a foundation that doesn't exist. But the foundation does exist, she insisted. Our love exists. Our commitment to each other exists. Our shared history, our inside jokes, our dreams for the future, all of that exists and it's real and it matters more than a piece of paper from Nevada. Does it? Because right now, I feel like I don't know what's real and what's performance. I feel like I've been married to an actress who's been playing the role of my wife. The words hung between us like a physical barrier. Sarah's face crumpled again, and she sank back into the chair as if her legs could no longer support her. I've never been acting, she whispered. Every kiss, every I love you, every quiet moment we've shared, every fight we've had and made up from, every plan we've made for the future, all of it has been completely genuine. The only thing I was hiding was Marcus. The only thing, I repeated. Sarah, do you hear yourself? You talk about hiding your first marriage like it was some minor detail, like forgetting to mention you had a pet goldfish as a child. I know it sounds terrible when you put it like that. It sounds terrible because it is terrible. Sarah, you took away my right to make an informed decision about my own life. When I proposed to you, I thought I was proposing to a single woman. When I planned our wedding, I thought we were creating something new together, not just adding another layer to your existing marriage. The storm outside was beginning to move on, and the thunder was more distant now, but the rain continued to beat against the windows with relentless persistence. What would you have done? Sarah asked suddenly. If I had told you, before we got engaged, that I was still technically married to someone else but that I would get divorced before our wedding, what would you have done? The question caught me off guard, and I found myself considering it seriously for the first time. I don't know, I admitted. I would have been concerned that you had let such an important legal matter go unresolved for so long. I would have wondered why you hadn't prioritized getting divorced if that relationship was really over. But I probably would have worked with you to fix it. Probably? Probably. If you had been honest with me from the beginning, if you had said you needed my help dealing with a complicated situation from your past, I think I would have supported you through it. Sarah's eyes filled with something that might have been hope. And now? If we treated this like that situation, like a complicated problem we need to solve together, could you support me through fixing it now? I don't know, Sarah. The difference is that now I know you're capable of maintaining a massive lie for over a decade. Now I know that when faced with a difficult situation, your instinct is to deceive rather than to trust me with the truth. How do I know you won't do the same thing again the next time something complicated comes up? Because I've learned my lesson. Because I've seen what keeping secrets does to the people I love. Because I never want to go through anything like today ever again. Have you learned your lesson? Or have you just been caught? If Marcus hadn't shown up today, if his fiancée hadn't forced the issue by trying to get married, would you ever have told me the truth? Sarah was quiet for a long time, staring down at her hands folded in her lap. When she finally looked up, her honesty was more devastating than any lie could have been. I don't know, she said. I want to say yes, I want to believe that I would have found the courage eventually, but I've been telling myself I would handle it eventually for 13 years. So I honestly don't know if I ever would have been brave enough to tell you. Her admission hung in the air between us like a confession and a condemnation. At least she was finally being completely honest, even if that honesty revealed the depth of her cowardice. Thank you for telling me the truth about that, I said. It's probably the first completely honest thing you've said to me today. David, what do you want from me? I've admitted I was wrong, I've apologized, I'm fixing the legal situation as quickly as possible. What else can I do? I don't know what you can do, Sarah. I don't know if there's anything you can do. Some mistakes are too big to fix. Don't say that.
Please don't say our marriage is too broken to fix.
Our marriage doesn't exist, I reminded her.
We're going to need to build something entirely new, and I don't know if I have the energy or the trust necessary to do that.
Sarah stood up again and walked to the window, staring out at the rain-soaked yard where her garden lay dormant under the gray sky.
I planted that garden the year after we bought the house, she said quietly.
Do you remember?
I had never grown vegetables before, but I was so excited about having our own place, our own little piece of land where we could create something together.
I remember.
You planted everything too early and most of it died in a late frost.
But I tried again the next year. And the year after that. And now it feeds us every summer.
She turned back to face me.
David, I know I've made a terrible mistake. I know I've damaged something precious and irreplaceable. But relationships are like gardens.
Sometimes plants die, sometimes you have to start over, but if you keep trying, if you keep tending and caring and believing, eventually something beautiful grows.
That's a pretty metaphor, Sarah.
But gardens are built on honest soil. Our garden has been growing in contaminated ground for 13 years.
Then let's clean the soil. Let's pull up all the weeds and start fresh.
Let's plant something new together, something that can grow in the full sunlight of complete honesty.
I wanted to believe her.
Despite everything, despite the anger and betrayal and hurt, part of me still loved the woman I had thought I was married to. But I could not separate that woman from the woman sitting in my office, the one who had proven herself capable of such sustained deception.
I need time, I said finally.
Sarah, I can't make any decisions about our future right now. I'm too angry, too hurt, too confused about what's real and what isn't.
I need space to think. How much space? How much time? I don't know. Weeks, maybe months. Maybe I'll need to talk to a counselor or a lawyer or both.
Maybe I'll need to take a trip somewhere, get away from this house and all the memories that now feel tainted. Sarah nodded, though I could see the effort it cost her to accept this.
Where will you go? She asked. I don't know that either.
Maybe to my sister's place in Colorado.
Maybe I'll rent an apartment in town. Maybe I'll drive to the ocean and sit on a beach until I can think clearly again. And what about me? What do I do while you're figuring out if you still want to be married to me?
You sign those divorce papers, for starters. You clean up the legal mess you've created. And then you figure out how to live with the consequences of 13 years of lies.
Will you call me? While you're away, will you at least let me know you're okay? I don't know, Sarah. Right now, I don't even know if I want to see you again, much less talk to you.
The cruelty of my own words surprised me, but I could not take them back.
This was what betrayal felt like, I realized.
This was what it meant to discover that your entire life had been built on false premises. Sarah absorbed my words like physical blows, her shoulders sagging with each cruel syllable. But she did not argue or protest or try to negotiate. Instead, she nodded with the resignation of someone who had finally accepted the full weight of her actions.
I understand, she said quietly. David, I want you to know that whatever you decide, I'll respect your choice.
If you decide you can't forgive me, if you decide you don't want to try to rebuild what we had, I won't fight you on it.
You deserve to be with someone who's honest with you from the very beginning.
This unexpected grace in the face of my anger caught me off guard. I had been prepared for more tears, more pleading, more desperate attempts to salvage our relationship. Her willingness to let me go, even as it clearly broke her heart, reminded me of the woman I had fallen in love with 13 years ago.
Sarah, I started, then stopped. I did not know how to finish that sentence.
I'm going to pack a bag, she said. I'll stay at my sister's place tonight, give you some space to process all of this.
Tomorrow I'll call Marcus and make sure he has everything he needs to file the papers. You don't have to leave your own house.
It's not my house, she said with a sad smile.
Legally, I mean. It's yours. I'm not on the deed because we weren't actually married when we bought it.
Another one of those practical complications I never thought through properly. The reminder of yet another legal irregularity caused by her deception made my head spin.
How many other aspects of our shared life would turn out to be legally questionable? Sarah, regardless of what the paperwork says, this is your home too. You don't have to leave.
Yes, I do. You need space, and I need to start facing the reality of what my choices have cost us.
Maybe spending a night away from here will help me understand what I've thrown away.
She headed toward the door, then paused and turned back to me.
David, I know you probably don't want to hear this right now, but I need to say it anyway.
I have loved you with everything I had to give for 13 years.
That love was never false, never performed, never anything less than completely real. Whatever else you doubt about me, please don't doubt that.
And then she was gone, her footsteps echoing up the stairs as she went to pack whatever she would need for a night in exile. I sat in my office listening to the sounds of her moving around our bedroom, opening drawers and closing suitcase zippers, and I tried to imagine what it would feel like to live in this house without her.
The house felt different after Sarah left.
Quieter, certainly, but also somehow smaller, as if her absence had caused the walls to move closer together. I wandered from room to room, seeing familiar objects with new eyes.
The wedding photos on the mantel now looked like elaborate stage productions.
The joint bank statements stacked neatly on the kitchen counter represented financial arrangements that had never been legally valid. Even the bed we shared seemed foreign, transformed from a symbol of intimacy into evidence of fraud. I tried to work, tried to lose myself in the familiar routine of design projects and client deadlines, but I found myself reading the same emails over and over without comprehending their content. My mind kept returning to the conversation with Marcus, to the look on Sarah's face when she realized her secret had finally been exposed, to the thousands of small moments over 13 years that now seemed tainted by deception. Around midnight, my phone buzzed with a text message from Sarah.
Made it to Linda's safely. Marcus picked up the papers. We'll file them tomorrow morning. I love you.
I stared at the message for a long time without responding. 3 simple sentences that somehow encapsulated the entire tragedy of our situation. She was handling the practical aspects of dissolving her first marriage while expressing love for her second husband, who might not want to be her husband anymore.
I did not text back.
The next morning brought clear skies and the kind of crisp autumn air that usually made me grateful to live in the Midwest. But as I stood in the kitchen making coffee for 1 instead of 2, the beautiful weather felt like a mockery of my internal storm.
My phone rang just after 9 o'clock. The caller ID showed Marcus's name. Mr. Patterson? It's Marcus Webb.
I wanted to let you know that I filed the divorce papers this morning. The clerk said it should be final in 60 to 90 days, assuming no complications arise.
Thank you for letting me know. Mr. Patterson, I hope you don't mind me asking, but how are you holding up? I know yesterday was a lot to process. The question surprised me.
This man who had been a stranger 24 hours ago was checking on my emotional well-being while dealing with his own complicated situation.
I'm not sure how to answer that, I admitted.
I feel like I'm grieving the death of my marriage while simultaneously discovering it never existed in the first place. Marcus was quiet for a moment. I went through something similar when I found out Sarah had remarried, he said finally. Not the same thing, obviously, but there was this weird grief for a relationship that I thought had ended cleanly 17 years ago but apparently had been continuing in legal limbo all this time.
How are you dealing with it? Honestly?
I'm trying to focus on the future.
My fiancée, Rebecca, has been incredibly patient through all of this mess.
She could have been angry or jealous or suspicious, but instead she's been supportive and understanding. It's made me realize how much I want to build an honest relationship with her, one that's not complicated by unresolved issues from the past.
The implicit contrast between his fiancée's understanding and my own anger was not lost on me. What was Sarah like when you were married? I found myself asking. Was she honest with you?
Marcus considered the question carefully.
We were so young, Mr. Patterson.
Barely out of high school, convinced we knew everything about love and life and commitment. Sarah was sweet and romantic and full of big dreams about our future together.
But we were both just kids playing house, you know? Neither of us really understood what marriage meant or what it required. Was she dishonest about anything? Not that I knew about at the time.
But looking back, I think we were both dishonest with ourselves about whether we were ready for marriage. We were in love with the idea of being in love, if that makes sense.
We confused intensity for maturity and passion for compatibility. Why didn't you get divorced when you separated? Pure procrastination at first.
Neither of us was planning to marry anyone else, so it didn't seem urgent.
And then, honestly, we were both a little proud.
Getting divorced felt like admitting failure, and we were both too young and stubborn to want to do that officially.
Do you think she would have told me about you if she'd had more courage? Marcus sighed deeply. I think Sarah has always been conflict avoidant.
Even when we were married, she would go to great lengths to avoid difficult conversations. I think she probably convinced herself that as long as you never found out, her deception wasn't really hurting anyone.
But it was hurting people.
It was hurting me, even if I didn't know it.
Yes, it was. And I think deep down, Sarah knew that. I think that's why she looked so devastated yesterday when everything came out.
She's been carrying the weight of that knowledge for 13 years. We talked for a few more minutes about logistics and timelines, and then Marcus wished me well and hung up.
His call left me feeling strangely comforted.
Here was a man who had been personally wronged by Sarah's deception, yet he seemed to harbor no anger toward her. Instead, he had offered perspective and even a kind of gentle advocacy for her character.
If he could be understanding about Sarah's failures, why couldn't I?
But then I remembered that Marcus had moved on, had built a new relationship with someone else, was planning a future that did not depend on trusting Sarah again.
It was easy to be generous toward someone who could no longer hurt you.